Building your own home is a big achievement in life. Let me tell you about how my marriage started to fall apart just after we reached this peak of happiness. My name is Abigail, and I'm 30 years old. My family includes my husband Gary, who is 35, and our 3-year-old daughter Sarah. We decided to build our dream home. You might think everything was smooth sailing and filled with happiness. That's what most people would assume. But for me, it's quite the opposite. Lately, with our new house being built and problems with my in-laws, I've been endlessly worried. The first sign of trouble in our relationship came when we left Sarah at my in-laws' place. Both my husband and I work, so we rarely have any free time. On weekdays, we spend our weekends searching for the right materials and discussing the design of our house. When we took Sarah with us, she would often get bored and restless, so we usually left her with my parents who lived close by. But one morning my father fell and had to see the doctor, so he couldn't watch Sarah. I thought we should cancel our plans for the day. However, Gary suggested, why not leave her at my parents' house? Honestly, I don't have a good relationship with my in-laws. They don't think they need to respect their son's wife. To them, since I'm married into the family, they can say whatever they want. What century are they living in? I felt uncomfortable asking them to babysit a 3-year-old, but if we postponed our plans, it would delay finishing our house. Despite my doubts, we decided to leave Sarah with my in-laws for the day. After we finished our tasks, we stopped at a store and bought some expensive pastries as a thank you gift, then went straight to my in-laws' house. When we arrived that evening, maybe because of the gift, they seemed to be in a good mood. After thanking my mother-in-law and father-in-law, on our way home Sarah asked, "Where's Grandpa and Grandma's room in our new house?" "Sweetie, what do you mean? Did Grandpa and Grandma ask you that?" "What did you tell them?" I asked. "I told them I didn't know," she replied, then went back to talking with her stuffed penguin she calls my parents. Granddad and Granny, so Grandpa and Grandma would refer to Gary's parents. Perhaps they were wondering if there's a guest room for them in our new house. At least, that's what I thought back then. After that day, my in-laws started visiting frequently, especially in the evenings on weekdays or holidays when we were home. Right now, we're living in a small, older apartment to save money for our house. Whenever my in-laws came over, they would immediately sit down on our dining chairs or sofa, asking to see the blueprints and paperwork for our house that was still being built. Before I could say anything, Gary would eagerly show them everything, explaining in detail. Why does he show them every time? It's already exhausting. They visited so often that my mother-in-law bombarded me with questions. It felt like I was being interrogated in a congressional hearing. It wasn't my husband in the hot seat, but me. I could almost hear the debate moderator saying, "Mil, you may speak." She would scrutinize the blueprint, pointing out flaws in the kitchen's layout and insisting we needed more guest rooms. She'd argue about the need for spare space and even joke about the declining birth rate, thankfully not seriously asking for my thoughts on it. Then it was my turn to respond. "Ms. Abigail, I'd say based on our discussions with my husband and the construction plans we've already set in motion, it's too late to change the layout." But my frustration grew as more questions followed about furniture and appliances. My mother-in-law claims to be a home expert. I've visited many friends' homes and seen different room setups. With that experience, I can easily recognize comfortable rooms and quality furniture. "This house and these rooms don't feel right, they have bad vibes, so things won't go smoothly," she declared with expert emphasis. It was a bit much, considering she's just my mother-in-law. She was so irritating that I jokingly suggested, "What if we turn it into a multi-generational home and split the costs 50-50?" But my in-laws didn't find it funny. "Are you asking us for money, you ungrateful child? A multi-generational home? I hate the idea of living so formally and reserved." That day they left early. Good riddance. You're not my real parents, and I don't owe you any respect. Instead of parents, they're more like guardians. Later that night, after putting our daughter to bed, my husband came to me looking frustrated. "Mom and Dad mean well, so don't be so distant with them." Cold? I didn't mean to come off that way, but aren't your parents being a bit rude? They constantly interfere with our decisions about our home. It's like they always look down on me, see me just as their daughter-in-law. That's just how parents are. It feels disrespectful to dismiss their advice like that. Don't you understand how that feels? Take a moment to think about it calmly. From then on, my husband turned away and didn't speak to me. I know they're your parents, but we're a separate household, and they haven't given us any financial support. They don't contribute financially but still have a lot to say. Isn't that unfair? My husband told me to calm down, but instead of cooling off, I was boiling with anger over the injustice, which made it hard to sleep. After some ups and downs, our house was finally finished. Just as our family was happily moving in, something unexpected happened. My parents are moving in with us starting today. Dad can take the bigger room upstairs and Mom will be fine in the smaller one. Wait a minute. Hold on. Where is this coming from? We agreed that one of the upstairs rooms would be for Sarah. I never heard anything about this. Plus, what if your parents decide they don't like the rooms? They might not say anything, but they've already seen them. Your parents checked out the rooms the day before we did. Wait, they saw the house before us? Yeah, they wanted to see it, so I gave them my key. It's not a big deal, my husband replied, clearly annoyed as he returned to working on the half-done TV cables. Not a big deal? Well, it is now. It's become a really big deal. I didn't want to see my husband's face, so I left the kitchen where I was packing and went upstairs. I locked myself in the room, trying to clear my head amidst the mix of anger and confusion. Thankfully, I had already dropped Sarah off at daycare, giving me some space and time to think amidst all the unpacking. The sudden news about living with my in-laws made me completely fed up with both my husband and his parents. I didn't want to spend another moment with them, but we had just invested significantly in this house. I needed to calm down and think rationally. I had to figure out what needed to be said and what didn't for the sake of my daughter and myself. I stayed in my room, deep in thought, waiting for my in-laws to arrive as my husband had mentioned they would be coming in the afternoon with a truck full of their belongings. You could at least greet us. Honestly, such rude people. Oh my, nothing's unpacked yet? You're so slow. I overheard my in-laws complain as they made themselves at home downstairs. I decided to go downstairs and face them at the entrance. Excuse me, but I wasn't informed about this living arrangement, I said, my voice unexpectedly cold. My father-in-law appeared annoyed and shot back. I told Gary, that should be enough. No, it's not. This morning was the first I heard about your plan to move in from Gary. I have no intention of living with you, especially after such disrespect. What? Gary agreed to it. You think you can defy your husband like that? Such a presumptuous daughter-in-law. If you don't like it, maybe you should leave. This is hopeless. We've always struggled to communicate properly with them. As I pondered my next words, my husband rushed over. What's going on, Abigail? Why are you arguing with my parents? This isn't just an argument. I'm being criticized simply for being your daughter-in-law, and now you're blaming me too. I realized once again Gary was just like his father. Like father, like son. Gary, I can't possibly live with your parents. Why not? You're making this difficult for me. As your wife, I'm an individual person. You can't force me to obey. Upon hearing our exchange, Gary's father exclaimed, We don't need such a daughter-in-law in our home. Then Gary agreed, maybe you're right. If she can't respect my parents, maybe we should divorce. I had been waiting for this. All right, let's get a divorce then, I stated clearly. My husband was the one who asked for divorce, and I, the wife, just agreed to what he wanted. With hope that my phone in my pocket would record our entire conversation properly, I continued, Since we'll be strangers now, please pay me back the $350,000 I loaned you for this house's construction. His parents gasped in shock, looking completely baffled. Gary's face turned pale as he stared at me. I calmly clarified to his stunned parents, there seems to be some confusion. Gary didn't contribute a single cent to buying this house. I used my savings because he didn't have any savings. We both worked and split our living expenses equally. The plan was to save individually, but he spent his money instead of saving. Abigail, that's enough, Gary interjected. It's true. Yet when we bought the house, Gary insisted it be in his name. That's why I loaned him the money, and we have a written agreement to prove it. No way, Gary exclaimed. Ignoring their disbelief, I quickly packed essentials, my daughter's toys and clothes, into suitcases and duffel bags. I held her favorite stuffed penguin close. Loading everything into my compact car, I drove away, saying goodbye to the house we had briefly called home. After picking up my daughter from daycare, we headed to my parents' home in Nebraska. My parents, dressed casually, were surprised to see me arrive with so much luggage. This is sudden, and I know it might be inconvenient. If it's too much trouble, I can stay at a motel, I offered hesitantly. They quickly assured me it was fine. Later, I found out they had been worried I might harm my daughter or myself, though I had sworn to protect her no matter what. I shared the whole story with them, explaining my decision to divorce Gary and my determination to raise our daughter alone. They promised full support and suggested I stay with them for a while, which was a great relief. Since I was working that night, I documented everything that had happened between Gary, his parents, and me. I saved voice recordings of our conversations on my computer and external drive. Armed with this evidence, I visited several law firms on my days off until I found a trustworthy lawyer and officially hired them. A week flew by in the hustle of everyday life since I left our new house. That day, after finishing work and leaving the office, I was surprised to find someone waiting for me. It was my husband, or rather ex-husband, though technically still my husband on paper until the divorce was finalized. I had no intention of speaking with him, but the fear of potential aggression kept me on edge. So I thought we should go somewhere public, he suggested, and we entered a coffee shop together. I made sure to activate the recording function on my phone, just in case. Trying to remain calm, I asked, "Do you have something to discuss?" "Yes, about the house. I'll transfer it to you and change the name on the deed. Can we consider the money issue settled?" "I'm sorry, but I can't live in that house anymore, especially after your parents were there before us." "Why worry about such details?" "It's not a small thing for me, so the answer is no," I said firmly, taking a sip of my coffee as I observed my ex-husband closely. His hair was messy, sticking out in places, and he had some stubble on his chin. Despite wearing a suit, his shirt was wrinkled, as if it hadn't been ironed or cleaned properly. I wondered about the kind of life he was leading, but he looked worn out. "Please, Abigail, I can't repay such a large sum of money that easily." "You knew it was a significant amount when you borrowed it, didn't you?" "I suggested we put both our names on the house, or even just mine, but you insisted it be in your name, claiming it was my house." "I thought I was the homeowner. I never really intended to get a divorce. I thought you knew I was just bluffing." "I was serious. I'm done with you, and I'm definitely getting a divorce. It's not just about your lack of responsibility. I can't handle your rude parents either." "But I have to go. Sarah is waiting for me." "Wait, I'm taking Sarah with me." Fear gripped me at my ex-husband's words. When I returned to my parents' house, I asked them to be cautious, afraid he might try to take Sarah by force. A few days after my ex-husband's visit, I received word that my in-laws were at Sarah's daycare. I left work early and hurried to the daycare. Fortunately, I had informed them beforehand, so they had my in-laws waiting in a separate room where they couldn't see Sarah. As soon as I entered the room with my in-laws, they started shouting at me. "Give us our granddaughter back, you gold-digging thief." "What do you mean, thief? I haven't stolen anything." "If you're not a thief, then you must be a con artist. You must have done something shady to get that kind of money at your age. It doesn't make sense for you to have so much money." "No, all the money I lent to Gary was mine. It's all from my hard work, my savings, and the gift money from my parents and grandmother." "What gift money?" "Every year my parents gifted me a certain amount to avoid taxes, which was directly deposited into my account. Along with money from selling some stocks and my savings, that's where it all came from." "So all that money really was yours. Didn't you give any money as a gift to Gary?" "You can still make gifts, you know." My father-in-law grunted and fell silent. They like to spend on expensive things and show off, enjoying luxury above all. As a regular working-class family without passive income, it's clear they probably don't have much in savings. They would never have thought to give money like my parents did. "I'm sorry, but I'm divorcing Gary. I'll be taking custody of Sarah. Please don't come to the daycare anymore." With that, I quickly got Sarah into the car and drove straight to my parents' home. Despite my warnings, Gary and my in-laws continued to show up several times after that. Each time, I tried to stay calm and send them away. However, they often grabbed my arm or shouted hurtful things at me. After I left our new home, I meticulously recorded everything on my phone. About a month later, I sent a letter through my lawyer demanding repayment of debts and a divorce agreement. My ex-husband agreed in principle, but he contested custody of Sarah. However, when I mentioned alimony, his demeanor changed drastically. He looked pale and became much quieter. Armed with ample evidence against him and knowing he had no savings, I pursued my case diligently. It took some time, but I eventually won custody of Sarah, reclaimed the money I had loaned to my ex-husband, and finalized the divorce. Retrieving all the debt repayments from him took longer than expected, mainly because the sale of our new house encountered difficulties initially. I had fought against Gary and his parents moving into the new house, but they couldn't afford the $350,000. Gary lacked savings, and even if his parents sold their old home, it wouldn't cover the cost. Eventually, they had to list the new house for less than they bought it for. After several price drops, they finally found a buyer. The difference between the buying and selling prices, along with real estate commissions, was borrowed from the bank by my ex-husband. Losing the house and burdened with debt, my ex-husband ended up moving back in with his parents into their old, run-down house. To make matters worse, Gary's divorced sister also moved back in with her 2 teenage sons. Now 6 people were squeezed into a small, old home. It quickly gained a reputation in the neighborhood for constant arguments and tension. Fortunately, that family no longer bothered us. With Gary struggling to afford child support, it's no surprise he's kept a low profile. 4 years have passed since then, and my daughter Sarah is now in 2nd grade. We're renting a place near my parents' home, and on days when I'm late from work, they look after Sarah. Despite the challenges, we're managing well and enjoying our time together. I had thought I might stay single and continue living like this forever, but recently I've started dating someone. He's a 36-year-old man who was previously married and has a daughter in 1st grade. We got to know each other through school drop-offs and pickups, and he eventually expressed his feelings for me. Lately, we've been going out together with our daughters. The other day, Sarah casually mentioned, if we ever build a house, it'd be nice if all 4 of us had our own rooms, and maybe we could get a dog. My heart skipped a beat. In fact, he had proposed to me not long ago. Both of us have daughters, and they come first in our decisions, so I haven't given him a definite answer yet. But now, I've made up my mind. I hugged Sarah tightly and said, "That sounds wonderful. I'd love to build a new home. This time we'll all discuss it together as a family and make sure it's a place where everyone can be happy."